thank you to all of you who have joined. As Drew mentioned, my name is Randi Reppen, and I teach at Northern Arizona University in the state of Arizona, obviously, where we had some nice little bits of snow on Tuesday, a little bit Monday evening. So Arizona definitely is not all desert. And today I want to talk to you about Grammar and Beyond, and I want to focus on the title. You might be thinking, why do they have beyond in the title? And so we're going to look at that a little bit. And so I have 4 points for today's presentation. And my goal throughout the presentation is to highlight some of the features of this series that I feel, whether you're using Grammar and Beyond or Grammar and Beyond Essentials, that are unique and make the series, I think, particularly strong. And I also want to give you some ideas of activities that you can use with this book, with this series, or also just some ideas for classroom use that, you don't necessarily, you could apply it to other books too, but I want to highlight these things. And so the 3 things that I want to focus on are that Grammar and Beyond goes beyond traditional grammar books. It's based on more than just tradition. And that it goes beyond just grammar, if you can think about grammar as being just grammar, and show how with integrated skills. And then I want to highlight a theme that I hope that you will have hopefully seen through the points 1 and 2, that it also goes beyond the classroom, because there's not much point in our learners just learning how to be successful in our classroom. We want them to be able to take that and go beyond our classrooms. So that's the general goal of this presentation. And so I hope that I meet that goal. So beyond traditional grammar books. Why do I think that? Mainly because it is a series that has been corpus informed, so based on actual language data. It's also been informed by classroom-based research, and it's also been informed by research on learning. And so the information that's presented in this series is accurate, and it represents language as it's used. And so you're going to see some examples of that. And the main area, the most obvious area, I guess, is data from the real world, which I'll show you some examples of. But that's actually based on this corpus-informed research. And we also have a section called Avoiding Common Mistakes and Editing Practice that links both research on typical learner errors, and I'll talk some more about that in the second section of the presentation, and also the fact that we know that if we practice skills, those skills transfer, and so we're going to look at editing. The other thing that I think is really important about that helps to set this grammar series apart is that we have thematic units and thematic exercises. So the content is coherent and it's cohesive. And we know from research on learning that increases the uptake of the students to be able to gain the material. We also, based on learning research, know that engaging multiple skills and having students move across these different skills increases learning, and also to do things individually and in pairs and groups. When you have to tell someone about what you're learning, that helps you control it more owning it than renting it in a sense. And the readings that we have reflect actual patterns of use. So there's not over presentation of the target features. So this is sort of a dense introduction to the themes that I'm going to be teasing apart in this presentation. And that we also, throughout, if you look at a unit in Grammar and Beyond, you'll see that there's scaffolding that builds learner autonomy. So we start out with very controlled practice, and then we move to more open-ended practice and direct application. So these are the themes that I will be addressing and highlighting throughout the presentation. So I talked a little bit about data from the real world, and this is based on corpus research. And in this example, and in other examples that you'll see throughout the book, you can see that we have vocabulary, grammar, and context being highlighted. And so here, this is something we know in academic writing, that we want to be able to highlight information to point out what is important, or we want to be also able to hedge sometimes. We don't want to make things sound too strong. And this is a real tricky dance that our students engage in. And it's really hard for novice writers, even in their first language. So it's especially hard for second language writers in English. And English is one of those tricky languages that has a lot of covert systems. So here we help students to see things that are very adjectives that frequently occur. So, using this structure, this it is structure, it is important to, it is clear that, it is difficult to. So we give them some language chunks that they can use. And we help them see what's most frequent. Not that you can only use what's most frequent, but it's good to know what is frequent, because when they're reading, they will be encountering these. And then also context. So we know here when we're doing cause and effect writing, and so I've chosen these examples because they're highlighted with academic writing, but it could also be used in speech if you're having your students do a debate. So if they're debating something and they want to explain cause and effect relationships, we know that these nouns, cause, reason, and factor, are very common. That's based on research. And then here we can see adjectives that frequently occur with cause, or frequently occur with reason, or frequently occur with factor. And so these provide really nice building blocks that we know reflects language that the students are going to encounter and that they need to control. So this is what I mean by research-based real language use, and it's contextualized. So you might be thinking, okay, they've got all these little boxes and tables, but do you have charts? I'm a grammar teacher. I love charts. So yes, we have charts. And I actually want to show you some ideas, because I think sometimes we go through charts in a pretty decontextualized way. And so I want to talk about how we can maybe have some fun with charts, and hopefully our students will also think it's fun. So I have some example activities here that maybe you could use in your classes. One I like to call becoming an expert. And in this activity, I actually suggest that you make a copy of the grammar chart that you're teaching or reviewing. And then you cut the chart into sections so that you have rules and examples. And I'll show you a concrete example of this in the next slide. And so you've cut the chart up, and as students come into the classroom, you hand them a piece of the chart. And then when the class begins, the students have to find their chart partner. So they're going around talking about, do you have the other half of this? I have the rule. Which rule does this apply to your examples? And then now those students become the experts on that portion of the chart. So this could also be used later on in writing and peer editing. So to make it really clear, if we were doing this with plural nouns, you would cut the chart up like so, and then you would hand these pieces as students come in. And so it could also be that several students have similar parts to the chart. So maybe two students have how to form singular nouns to plural, from plural nouns, sorry. Form plural nouns from singular nouns. You can also do something that I call a grammar scavenger. Instead of going through the examples, give the students the rule side, that's typically the left side, and then have the students look in their readings or in their textbooks or even in their own writing to get examples. And this helps reinforce that idea that grammar is applied. It's not just this thing we learn and recite as a rote activity, but it's something that's essential and central to language use. And then you can also have a variation. Perhaps you're doing a review and you think the students already have pretty good control of the target form. Give them the example and have them infer the rule. So I hope that from those brief little examples of activities, you can see how you can take something like charts, and rather than just sort of marching through it or saying, yeah, take a look at the chart, you can actually have students engaged in this. The second part of this presentation, and where I'll spend the bulk of the time that we have together, is the idea that we're moving beyond just grammar. I think that a lot of people, grammar has a bad rap. And a lot of times we have these classrooms where we're teaching grammar, but we're not contextualizing it. We're not integrating skills. We're not showing how grammar is so essential to successful reading, successful academic writing, successful listening, successful speaking. So I want to take some time to highlight some aspects where we go beyond just grammar. And so here's an example where in Grammar and Beyond, every unit begins with a reading to sort of contextualize the theme, provide some background knowledge. But you'll notice that every reading also has a noticing activity. And like many textbooks in the readings, we highlight certain words. We use font enhancement, which is used to supposedly help students raise awareness. But I want to point out that guided noticing can be more helpful and actually more effective and efficient, because just you hope that the student notices this bolder terms or color font, but maybe they don't. So in this, students are actually going in, and this has a twofold benefit. They're having to scan, in this case, they're looking for the gap that this sentence has, finding the filler for this in the reading. So they're practicing a reading strategy because they're scanning and skimming to find this sentence. And then after they've filled in these sentences, now they're looking at this to see which verbs end in S. And so we're here looking at regular verbs, and we're having students engage in discovering how subject-verb agreement works with regular verbs. So this is a nice way to do guided noticing, to contextualize the grammar point in the reading, and also just sort of build awareness that we can look at language and figure it out a lot of times. And so there are patterns. Grammar has patterns. We also use a lot of models. And so in this case, I think it's really, well, not in this case, always, it's really important to have students engaged in instruction, engaged in learning. And so seeing that language choices are functional and they're not just exercises in a book. So in this case, again, this is building on a noticing activity, having students, if we're looking at simple past and present perfect verbs, which are, and I haven't shown you the paragraph, but, having students look at this and think, why did we make this choice between simple past and present perfect? And so rereading and talking and having students talk to each other about this, it helps students to be able to see, oh, and this is taking the learning and making it purposeful versus just some rule that you hope you remember and you hope you can apply it in the right place. So this notion of really going beyond just rote learning and actual application. Again, looking at reading. So we've talked about students are reading, they're going back, practicing reading strategies, but also in our readings, the readings, this is a grammar book, but it goes beyond just grammar to integrate and contextualize the use of grammar, because it does have a function. And so the readings, many times in books that have a particular goal, or in a unit that has a particular goal, we sometimes over present. And so in our readings, the texts actually reflect patterns of use. They reflect the patterns that are used, and the features and the amount of space given to those target features are carefully provided so that features are not forced, and they're also not overpresented. Many times in research on learner language, we see, oh, learners are overusing such and such a form. Well, part of that's a natural part of learning, right? When you learn something new, you want to practice it, you want to use it. So you're taking opportunities to present and practice. But many times it's because we've provided models that don't reflect actual practice, actual real language use. And so things are overpresented, and then our students tend to overuse those features. And so if we practice, if we have texts that reflect actual use, our learners are going to be better able to transfer this into their own writing and actually be closer to, I hate to say target norms, but we know that there are certain expectations in academic classrooms, whether you value that or not, of certain styles of writing. And so in order for our learners, even if we want to be agents of change, we need to be able to have them be able to write in a way that allows them to then move ahead and be agents of change. And you might be thinking, well, there's all this reading, there's all these things. Do we have practice? Of course we have practice. And so we actually, in exercises, in activities related to exercises, I think it's really important to incorporate as many skills as we can. And as you saw earlier, even having students go look to fill in gaps, it doesn't stop with filling in the gap from the reading. It is engaging with, why do you think those verbs had S's and these verbs didn't? So I want to give you some examples. When we're doing exercises, sometimes we can take students and put them in teams of 2 and 4 and have the students carry out the exercises, record who finishes first, check answers round robin style, which then gives everybody a chance to be a participant, or have a team that won read their answers. That's giving speaking practice. And so it's just a nice way to make activities and exercises more engaging. You can also possibly assign questions to different groups. And this can also be a really good technique with a mixed level class where the students are not all at the same level, but yet they can work as a group to answer these questions. And the stronger students can be explaining to the students who possibly don't control that feature as well. So this is the idea of taking these exercises and having them be a bit more engaging rather than just going through question 1, question 2, question 3. We can also see here, if we think that this is review, maybe have it assigned for homework and check it as a class. This can be a way to see if students, if students already control this. I don't know about you, but I've never found it useful to practice something that I already knew, or that my students knew. I thought it was a waste of class time, so I can confirm by having them do this as homework. And even sometimes I would say, this should take you 20 minutes to do this set of exercises. Stop at 20 minutes, because that gives me a sense of how well how automatically the students can control it. And then if students aren't doing well with an exercise, or if students are having some incorrect answers, maybe there's a pattern in the class, figuring out why, asking students, well, why did you choose that? To know the thought process, because our students are smart and they go through a thought process as they're doing these exercises. So it's valuable for us to know what that process is to make our teaching more effective. And I think this is a really good idea to take exercises or activities, use the ones in the book as models, and have students create their own activities and use them with each other. And also maybe doing this with audio activities. I think most of our students have smartphones. They could be recording. This is a good chance to work on pronunciation and accuracy, even if they're practicing just gap fill activities. So this is a nice thing where you could have groups of students working to create exercises, and there's more ownership in this activity. But now I want to focus more on actually writing, academic writing. This is something that's hard for all of us. It's hard for even people who have been writing for a very long time. I think none of us would say, oh yeah, academic writing, that's a piece of cake. So one of the things that you'll notice in Grammar and Beyond is that we focus on what could be called content-based language teaching, or task-based language teaching, a genre approach, or an approach that also meets Common Core standards. So these are already integrated into Grammar and Beyond, because we have a focus on academic writing. And academic writing, as you know, has a very informational focus, but it will have different types of tasks. And so throughout Grammar and Beyond, we have different types of typical academic tasks. We have descriptive tasks. We have an argument or taking a position task. We have summary and response. We have opinion tasks. Arguments and opinions and informational writing are very typical academic tasks across most disciplines, but then there are also summary and response, which is a real tricky task where you have to summarize, but then you have to evaluate or give a response to what you've summarized. And then something that many of our students have a lot of practice with is writing narratives. But in this case, the academic focus of narratives can be tricky. And so we have students, we have to see in social sciences often, and in history particularly, students write narratives, but it's an informational focus. It's not sort of how I spent my summer vacation. And another thing that I think is also important is how to write an email. A lot of students use emails for interpersonal communication or texts, but we have to help students see that that kind of communication has to be changed when they're using it in an academic context. So we provide all these types of models and practice in grammar and beyond, and really try to engage students in this. And so we emphasize the writing process, and I want to show you a little bit how we do that. So in the second edition of Grammar and Beyond, where we focus heavily on academic writing in the last section of each unit, we systematically scaffold students through the writing process. And I'm going to give you some examples of this, of how we move from brainstorming, making notes, drafting, revising, all the way to the final version. And part of that is also evaluating sources. This is a really important part of academic writing, and this is revisited at each level through Grammar and Beyond. And we also present different writing techniques. We have different ways of brainstorming, finding sources, organizing information. We use a lot of graphic organizers, and I'll be showing you some of this. And we also teach peer editing and self-editing. And we really try to structure so that we're scaffolding and building autonomy. And I think you'll see this in the next couple slides as I show how you can walk through this process in Grammar and Beyond. So here's an example of when we start a unit. We start always with brainstorming. And you can see brainstorming is highlighted, but these are the other parts that we'll go through. And you can see that this is taking place over five units. So there's a cohesion of topic and of prompt as we build the resources that we need to come up with a final product. You can see here that as we move from brainstorming in Unit 2, we then connect that with Unit 3 as we start organizing the information. And so I'll show you some of the highlights that some of the techniques that we use for organizing information, because different tasks require different organizational strategies. So in this case, we're looking at an opinion essay, and we're looking at how people could evaluate evidence given for a particular opinion. So we've provided models, but we didn't just give students models and say, okay, here's a model, go write your opinion paper. We actually have students then engage with that model through the use of a T-chart, where they go back to the reading, which if you were looking at the textbook, it would be above this so you could see it. And so the students have to identify for and against, and then they need to add. They have to think of some additional reasons for or against these, the opinion of whether governments should spend more money or not spend money on space exploration, which is the prompt that they're following throughout these units. When we're doing more of a descriptive task, we could use something to just generate vocabulary. In this case, it's describing shawarma, a type of food. And so it gives some questions to help students get ideas here. They've been reading about this, so they have some context and background information. And then they take that information and they organize it in a way that will help them write a more effective essay. So again, looking at academic writing, this is actually one of my favorite I love Venn diagrams. And so this is a Venn diagram for compare contrast. So we have the features of one, the features of the other, and then the features that are shared. So we have all these nice techniques, but then we also know that there are certain things about language use or producing language that is particularly tricky for certain levels. So throughout Grammar and Beyond, we have a section of common mistakes, and this is based on learner corpus research. And so it's not based on, gee, I've been teaching for 15 years and I know that my learners have trouble with that. Many of you have that experience, and that's a wonderful thing. But maybe the language group that you're teaching changes and you don't have that experience with that particular language group. So this is based on research that I did with access to a learner corpus that was tagged for errors that Cambridge has. And so I was able to see the types of errors that are frequently made across different languages at particular levels for particular structures. So this is a really valuable resource. And then in addition to just saying, hey, watch out for these, we actually have students do an editing task that's focused on these frequent mistakes. And so this also helps students. It's very hard to edit your own writing, but at least this way you are practicing doing editing, and then this will transfer hopefully to your own writing. We also emphasize, as I said, a lot with writing, and part of that is doing peer editing. So we provide lots of checklists for going from peer editing, working with a partner, and giving guiding questions to help the peer editing be effective. And then checklists for students to be able to look at their own writing after they've had their peer feedback and maybe teacher feedback, and they're working on their final version. We give them questions about, about the content, but then also questions to focus on grammar. And this is useful also for the teacher to help guide the feedback that the teacher gives to the student. And I did mention that we also we don't want our students just to be successful in our classroom. Of course, we want them to be successful there, but we want them to be able to use language beyond our classroom. And so in order for that to happen, we need to teach our students language as it's used. And so I want you to think about your language classroom where you teach, or maybe a language classroom that you've been in. And I want you to think about a WH question. And so obviously we don't have interaction voice right now, but you just have to listen to me. But what I would say is, if I ask you this question, I want you to answer this question in your mind. What time is it? And so hopefully you've answered this question. And if you're like me, you would have looked at your watch or your phone and you would have said, it's where I am, it's 12:30. I wouldn't have said, the time is 12:30. And so many times in our language classrooms, we're with WH questions particularly, we're not teaching our students the strategies and the responses that are expected. When did you start studying English? The response is, after I got my job at the museum, not when did you start studying English? I started studying English after. So we want our students to be practicing language as it's used. And so we want our classrooms to reflect that. We also could help our students with some ideas such as a personal grammar log. Many of you probably have your students keep vocabulary logs. A grammar log is much like that, except students keep useful examples that they encounter. And in my classrooms, I always ask my students to carry this with them when they're not in the classroom, so that if something comes up, they can jot it down. And then next class, we'll often start class with, did anybody, encounter something strange? And one of the activities I like to do with this is what I call writing the wrongs. So taking the incorrect and moving it over to correct. And I call my students language detectives. Maybe several of you have used this in your classrooms based on student papers that you've received, and you might put something on the board so that when students come in, they have a sentence or a phrase that they come in and in their vocabulary journals or whatever journals that you have them keep, they kind of write the wrong, they write it so that they correct it. And I take this a step farther to look at language detectives outside the classroom. So my students look for things and take photos now because it's so easy with the phones. So students take a photo or they jot it down if they don't want to take a photo, and they bring the offending language criminal in. So one example is tips. We see this very frequently where there's a possessive S instead of just plural. My students are great at catching this. We can see these weird verb formations. The door is broke. We know that that's not good. Some of you may have heard the story, but I actually saw this on a university door, not at my university, but at a different university. I thought that was a little scary, bad modeling. And then you can actually, maybe you have a word wall in your classroom. You can also have a word wall of correcting these poor examples, poor language examples. So to wrap up and leave time for questions, I hope you can see that our units highlight integrated skills and recycle across different units. It's principled information with models and scaffolded practice. It really does move us beyond a traditional grammar book. It integrates multiple skills. Grammar and Beyond could be used as a grammar course book, of course. It could be used as a writing course book, or it could even be used as a core textbook. And then you have, in a sense, language classes across your curriculum that support this and use it for maybe highlighting the listening, speaking activities. And beyond all that, we have detailed scope and sequence charts. We have QRs for listening activities. We have a digital workbook that's auto-graded. Some of you might have noticed the little icon with the editing that had in the upper right-hand corner on one of my slides. That is the indication that there's workbook activities. And then we have material that's been put into Kahoot, Quiz Your English, and Presentation Plus that you can use with Grammar and Beyond. And so you don't have to do the work to put this material in. So I will stop there, and I appreciate you coming to this at a busy time in the semester or quarter, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Randi. That was a great presentation as always.
Thanks.
Every time I listen to you speak, the part about the graphic organizer resonates with me. So I've actually started using it, not for academic writing, but it is really useful to organize thoughts for other types of writing as well. So that's great. Right, we have one question from Joseph. I hope I said that name right. For the advanced levels, how do you treat grammatical mood? For example, it is good that you're present versus it is better that you be present. The mood change in that clauses.
Let me look at this.
It's in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Okay.
So I think the way I would address this is that I would talk about how those, in a sense, feel different to me. Because one is affirming, it is good that you are present, it's highlighting that, versus it is better that you be present is actually more of a directive in a sense. It's advice. And so I would just talk about that. And I would also talk about the fact that you can't say it is better that, you can say it is better that you are present. Can you say it is good that you be present? That doesn't sound as natural to me. And then I would actually probably have my students, since this is at an advanced level, I would have them maybe look at an online corpus, maybe look at my cuss and have them look, or my case, because that's spoken, and have them look at examples in that and I would do this as a class, modeling my thought process for how I would unpack that. Does that answer your question, Yosef? I hope.
Yes, he says thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, next question, Zaina, sorry if I didn't say that correctly. She says, thank you, that was great. How can this be best how can this best be used in a K-12 setting?
So I actually don't think it could be used in a grade earlier than grade 11. So grade 11 and 12 with advanced learners, I think you could use it. Maybe if you're at a school, but that has very high level learners, you could use it there. I do think you could use the 4th level of Grammar and Beyond in a regular, that was a bad choice of words, in a writing class with even native speakers, because nobody is a native speaker or a native producer of academic language. We all have to learn that. So I would say that it would have to be used. I don't think it would be appropriate below maybe 10th, I guess 10th grade, depending on the level of, the students. But I would say that it wouldn't work for elementary school, and I don't think it would be successful in middle school.
Right, thank you. We have some like product related questions. I don't know if you want to take them. Do the teacher book includes tests?
Does the teacher book include tests? Is that the question?
Yes, I can take
there
that.
There are tests. There are tests for each unit, and you can also go in and edit those tests. And there are also something that's very nice about Grammar and Beyond is at the beginning of the book, it gives you a chart for helping to place your students based on TOEFL, IELTS, or CEFR. And there's also placement tests for Grammar and Beyond. And Kyoko, if you want to add more, I'm happy for that. So
yeah, so for Grammar and Beyond, it's the 2nd edition. All the teacher resources are on our new and updated LMS called Cambridge One. So the teachers can, if you log in as a teacher, you have access to the to add the content. You will need an access code from your sales representative to access the tests, but they are there, the PDF, and as Randy mentioned, the Word doc version, so you can move the questions around or change them up a little bit. Another question here from Gary. I have Grammar and Beyond 2, I believe the earlier edition. Is 2 a high level? If so, how many levels are there in the 2nd edition?
So there are 4 levels. So level 1 is high beginner, level 2 is low intermediate, level 3 is intermediate. To use those names is kind of ambiguous, right? And then level 4 is advanced. And like I said, the beginning of at the front of each of the levels, there's placement information. There's proficiency information, and there are placement tests. And I would recommend using those rather than, it's really hard because some programs have 6 levels, some have 3, and it's just really hard to know on individual situations.
Okay.
I see that I saw a question that I would like to respond to.
Go for it.
Which is are there communicative activities in the teacher's guide? And yes, there are communicative activities for both Grammar and Beyond Essentials and Grammar and Beyond. And there's also a newsletter that goes out every month that has lots more activities and ideas. And you can even look at the archives and search by, let's say that you want ideas for practicing vocabulary, or you want to look at ideas for writing activities or integrating listening and speaking. So those are really nice resources.
Yeah, and again, the communicative activities are part of the teacher resources on Cambridge One for Grammar and Beyond. And for Grammar and Beyond Essentials, they're on a platform called eSource, but they are the same activities for both courses. And that brings us to a question. Jean says she really likes the idea of the language detective, and she wants to know what the difference between Grammar and Beyond 2nd edition and Grammar and Beyond Essentials is. I know you talked about both, and most of the things you talked about in your presentation addresses both courses, but what would you say is the key difference?
So I would say the main difference between Grammar and Beyond Essentials and Grammar and Beyond is that the Grammar and Beyond Essentials does not have the emphasis on academic writing, scaffolding you through the process. So Grammar and Beyond second edition, for those of you who've used the first edition, you know that we have the common errors and the editing practice, and we have a writing task in that first edition. And in Grammar and Beyond Essentials, we've taken out that last writing task. But in the second edition of this is a long answer, I'm sorry. The second edition of Grammar and Beyond Grammar and Beyond, it has a really robust writing section. And so if you get car sick, don't look at this as I flip backwards in my PowerPoint. As you can see here, we have, keep going, don't get sick. We have a lot more, each unit is going through and it's thematically coherent. So we have opinion writing in this example, or we could have narrative, and we move you through between 3 to 5 units to go through the entire writing process. So there's a really robust emphasis on the writing process in the second edition.
All right, thank you. We have a question from Terry. Does the online app have the ability for students to record themselves and then for instructors to give manual feedback? How about grading tasks? So
Kyoko has to answer that.
So the digital workbook that comes with Grammar and Beyond second edition is not an app. It's on the Cambridge One platform learning management system. It can be used on a phone or tablet, but it's not an app that you have to download. And we don't have any speaking activities per se. It's all auto-graded, so there are either multiple choices, drag and drop. I do believe it has some writing tasks. They get sent to, that's for the Writing Skills Interactive, which is a separate online activity that also comes with the course. And those may have writing tasks. I'd have to look that up, but if they do have writing tasks, they are asked, I think the students send them to the teachers. They're not auto-graded.
Right, and I think, auto-grading is really nice, but with writing, as you know, writing isn't always easily auto-graded, and unfortunately teachers have to, I think it's actually fortunate, but it can take a lot of time. But I think that's where those checklists, those editing checklists come in to, as you're doing the first draft, you can then use those checklists to focus more on maybe content, and then the second draft focus on grammar. So if that helps, I think that can be helpful in giving effective feedback to students.
Great, and we have well, not a question, but a statement from Lutfi. Says, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, he's from Arizona.
Oh, okay. So thank you for the presentation. I look forward to using Grammar and Beyond next semester. So that's
nice. You'll have, let me know how it goes.
And we have another question from Joseph. For count and non-count nouns, I divide nouns into 4 categories: only mass nouns, mostly mass nouns, but can be countable at times. Count nouns, nouns only in plural. Do you find this a good way to teach the topic?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times with mass nouns, or what we call non-count nouns, it's often the quantity that makes that noun more countable, like milk. You have a glass of milk or a gallon of milk. So I like to point that out too, that adding something to a mass noun can help us count them. You can say I have 5 glasses of milk, or I bought 2 gallons of milk, but you don't want to say I have 5 milks. I see someone asked about getting registered for the newsletter. That's a good resource to be registered for. It won't spam you. It'll just give you, it will give you really cool activities every month.
Yes, and Drew has put the link to the sign up form in the chat, if you can all see that. And Yeah, it's a great, we send out an email once a month with links to blog posts, and it includes either teaching ideas like lessons on specific grammar topics, and also downloadable worksheets if you want to supplement your classroom with that. So it's a great source. And, sometimes it's just fun reading about the topics, and all the writers that we have are really terrific. So
Yeah. Someone asked about Presentation Plus, and that is an amazing addition to the second edition.
I'm trying to see if I can pull it up real quick to just show people.
I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Actually, we just recently posted a demo version of Presentation Plus, so everyone can take a look at 2 of our units, maybe 3 of our units of Presentation Plus for Grammar and Beyond on Cambridge 1. So while I try to logging in.
While you're logging in, I'm going to answer a question by Ola.
Okay.
She's asking if the texts for the reading are authentic, and they were in the 4th level. They are authentic texts that in some cases have had vocabulary simplified, and the citations, we practice all the citations that we are supposed to practice in that. And so you can see the list of, or the texts that they came from. For levels 1 through 3, we used extensive examples of that type of text. So if we're writing an argumentative text and we're trying to look at past tense, we looked at extensive examples of texts on those topics, and did write simplified texts for that. So I hope that answers your question, Ola.
So now I hope you can see my screen. I just logged into Cambridge One. So the URL is cambridge1.org. And if you create an account as a teacher, or if you already are using Grammar and Beyond on our CLMS platform, you can also use that login on Cambridge One. So if you go to my library here and search for Grammar and Beyond, you'll see all of the courses. It's very colorful. And if you scroll to the bottom, you see here, it says Presentation Plus Demo. So if you click on that, you'll have free access. You don't need any codes. And you can just click and launch Presentation Plus online. See if that works. Great. So I think someone asked about the table of contents and what content they have in here. So it's basically, it simulates the student's book. In the demo, we don't have all the pages, but if this were the full version, you would see the scope and sequence and the introduction, and you could see, each of the units you open up and you can go to the pages. These are just the headings, so it does include all the pages. So this is page 82. If you click on this icon, you can do the toolbar where you can highlight certain activities, and then you can enlarge them. Quickly going through these little icons with the key or the answer keys. So if you, this pops up the answers over here. I'm just trying to quickly go through the features. So these are all the student pick pages. This is exactly what they see if they have a print book. And this is the icon that Randi mentioned. This is where the sections where they has activities on in the digital workbook. And I'm trying to find the QR code. It's in this unit. Oh, here we go. So here you see the QR code. In the student's book, they would obviously point to the QR code with their phone, and they can listen to the audio themselves. But if you're using Presentation Plus, you just click on it. And I'm sorry, I apologize. I forgot to share the audio when I was doing the screen share. So you're not going to hear it, but you'll see the audio player pop up. And if you hit play, it will play the audio for that activity. And What else can you do? You can add notes to specific places. You can just write notes to yourself, or since if you're sharing a screen, you can write notes that you want all your students to see. And if you want to expand and just concentrate on one page, you can just do a single page view. This is the double page view. And again, you can zoom in to show just the sections you're working on as well. And I think I've heard from different teachers on how they're using Presentation Plus. And a lot of teachers, they seem to love combining this with Zoom, because Zoom has its own annotation tools. So you can maybe do a lot more with it than you can with Presentation Plus. For example, I think even the students have the ability to annotate. So if you ask them, to say, answer the question, they can use the stamp. I'm hoping you can see this. You can ask them to put a stamp next to their answer, and you can see like how many people say pick A and how many people pick B. And I think as a teacher, I've seen you can see like who puts the stamps where. So you can do that. That's a fun activity. And it makes it a little bit more interactive than doing the chat box, because you get to see like what your fellow students are doing, or the teachers can kind of visually see what they're doing. And you can also write text. So if there's like a fill-in answer, you can type in text here. So this answer, and it always tells you who wrote that. So it's easy to see who's being engaged, like who's engaged and which students may not be paying attention, or maybe they just need a little bit extra push. So that's a great way to use Presentation Plus if you're still teaching remotely. I think that just covers about everything, and we are getting close to the end of the session. So if there are no more questions, I think we're ready to call it a day. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's really special to have everyone here. And so I just thank you for joining us, and to Randi especially for taking the time to prepare the presentation. As always, it was fantastic. And we did record this session, so we'll be sharing that with you if anyone wants to review what was said, go over any tips. I know Randi had some great applications and teaching tips that you might want to review. So once you have the recording, you can watch it and pause it and take notes. So I hope you find it useful. Right. Thank you, everyone.
And thanks for coming. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules.